Most people don't picture Ellen White as a matchmaker. So let me tell you a story about Ellen White as a matchmaker. What do I mean by that? Trying to get an Adventist young man or an Adventist man with an Adventist woman for marriage. So here's the story. And where did I get the story? I got it from the lady herself. So it's about as genuine as I can tell you. The background of the story is that Ellen White's third son, W.C. White, married a lady named Mary Kelsey. And from that marriage, there were two granddaughters, Ella and Mabel. Tragically, Mary contracted tuberculosis in Europe while Ellen White was in Switzerland and Europe in the 1880s. And in 1890, Mary died. In 1891, her son, W.C. White, was invited to go to Australia with his mother when she went to the South Pacific. And because there were not very many Seventh-day Adventists in all of the South Pacific back then, they decided to leave Willie decided to leave his two daughters in Battle Creek. So he finds himself down there, gets to Australia, and he's looking around. Obviously he's lonely because his wife has died. And he's also lonesome because his two daughters are in Battle Creek, Michigan. So he's looking around to see if he might find a lady that would make a suitable wife. Now, we only had somewhere between 500 and 1,000 Adventists in all of the South Pacific back then. And many of those would be either too young, too old, or already married. So my point is there's not a large selection pool to be looking at. But one time he was down in the southern part of Australia in Tasmania, and he's in the home of the Lacey family. And there he sees a young lady who he thinks might be worth trying to get acquainted with. So he asks her, what are her plans? You know, good pastor that he is. He asks, what are her plans? Well, she wants to come up to Melbourne, where we had our training school. That was before Avondale College was established. Oh, that was good. And as he talked with her, he found out that she did not have enough money to pay her tuition. She needed work. That's even better, because he knew that his mother liked to hire students to work for her so that they would have money to pay their tuition. So Willie thought, if this young lady comes up here, her name was May, if May comes up here and I can arrange it so that mother invites her to come work for her, I can watch her and I can see whether I really am interested in this young lady and see how she gets along with my mother and how things are, and something may develop. I asked May, I said, do you think that, well, she later married Willie, so I said, do you think your husband told his mother? No, she said, I don't think that he had told his mother what he was up to. Anyway, so she comes up to the training school, and wouldn't you know, here comes an invitation from Ellen White to work for Mrs. White after school. So what are some of the things that May told me she did? Well, Ellen White did a lot of traveling. And so because of all of the stress she was under with all the writing and the traveling and the counseling and everything, she liked to have body massages. So May learned how to give a massage. Ellen White also liked to have scalp massages. So May learned how to give a scalp massage. Those things relaxed Ellen White. Another thing that she liked was she liked a salt glow. Now, I've never had a salt glow, but they've been described to me as you take salt and you have a leather mitten or glove, and with great amount of friction, you rub that salt on the skin and you get sweat coming, and that stimulates the circulation, and apparently it feels wonderful. At least years ago, when I would occasionally tell this story, some elderly person would come up to me afterwards and their eyes would glow as they would describe to me salt glows. So they must have been wonderful. I don't know, I've never had one. Anyway, on one occasion, May was giving Ellen White a salt glow, and she's there doing her thing, and it's not going right. And instead of whatever happens when you get the friction going and the sweat begins with salt, this is becoming a sticky, gooey mess, and she can't figure out what's going on. And Ellen White finally goes like this, and she tastes and sees it's sweet, and it's not salty. And she just busted out laughing and said, May, what are you trying to do today? Sweeten me up a bit? You see, what happened was they bought their salt and their sugar in 50-pound bags. And May was a little late that day, so when she came in a rush, instead of getting into the the salt bag, she got into the sugar bag. And so whatever wonderful thing salt does, sugar becomes a sticky, gooey mess. Anyway, so she cleaned things up. But again, it shows you how Ellen White, with her sense of humor, put this young girl at ease. And it wasn't a traumatic experience. Ellen White just said, "What are you trying to do? Sweeten me up today?" And with that, the girl went and cleaned up everything and gave her a salt glow. Anyway, after some period of time, one night just before Willie White was leaving for an extended trip, he was going by ship to New Zealand, and I don't remember where all she said. Anyway, he was going to be gone for a couple of months. Why, he called her out on the veranda or the porch of the house and began to talk with her. Now remember, he's a good minister, so he's got to be philosophical about this. So he begins to talk with her about what her plans are in life. And she said, "Well, I would like to become a matron," or today we would say a dean of women in one of our schools. Well, that's very good. And he talks to her about that. And pretty soon he starts talking to her about, how would you like to be a matron in a family? Now, she, of course, knew he had these 2 daughters that were in Battle Creek, Michigan. And she said to me, I realized he was proposing marriage. Now, she had never thought about marrying him. What I haven't told you so far is that, among other things, she's 19 years younger than he is. In addition, she has a boyfriend, or at least a crush on a guy that was going to the training school. How far they dated, I don't know. She made it sound like it wasn't all that serious, that they'd kind of noticed each other. But I've talked with some of his relatives, descendants in the family, and they seem to think it was very serious. Anyway, she's got this other guy, and she's younger, and she's never thought about it. And she said, well, when he asked her about being a matron in a family, and she finally dawned on her that he was asking marriage, proposing marriage, she said, well, and she named one of the secretaries there. I won't say who, since you're recording this, but one of the secretaries there, she's very much in love with you. And Willie White said, oh yes, everybody knows she's in love with me, but when I pray, it's always your name that comes up and not this other lady. Well, what's a young girl to do with an answer like that, So she said that she'd thought about it, and she finally said to him, well, I'll think about it, and I will pray about it, and I will send you my response. Now, the question that got this whole story started when I was talking with this elderly lady was, what was Ellen White's response when she found out that Willie was interested in marrying you? I was unmarried. I was in school at the time. I wasn't married. I'm curious about what is the reaction. So now we're to the reaction. What was the reaction? Willie leaves on his trip. She said, Willie could not have had a better ally than his mother. Because she said, every day when I would get there for work after school, she said, and she married Willie White later, so she called Ellen White mother. She said, mother would start in on me. Well, have you made up your mind yet? Willie would make a wonderful husband. She said, Willie could not have had a better ally than his mother, because Ellen White was working on her every day. Well, May said, there were some things that I had told myself that I would not get married until these were taken care of. One is, I would not get married until I was totally out of debt. So she told that to Ellen White. I can't even think about marrying Willie until I've earned enough money after I get out of school to pay off my debts. Ellen White said, well, how much do you owe? We can write a check. Now, why can't you marry Willie? And then, well, there was another one. Weddings cost, even a small, modest wedding, costs a little bit of money. Ellen White said, well, that's no problem. I have a seamstress. And if you know anything about Ellen White, while she was in Australia, she used to buy whole bolts of fabric so that she could give cloth to women there on the campus and that went to the church so they could make up dresses if they didn't have anything nice to wear for Sabbath. So she said to her, we got plenty of cloth here. We can make up any dresses you need, and I have a seamstress, so why can't you marry Willie? Ellen White was not going to take no for an answer. She apparently had also fallen for this young girl. And so then there was this other fellow whose name was Arthur Corral. Ellen White couldn't help much with Arthur Corral. That was something that May was going to have to sort out. Well, May told me, she said, I thought about it and I prayed about it. And I did think it would be a real honor to be a member in Ellen White's family. She said, I also had noticed what a kind man Willie White was. a gentleman. And I decided that any man that was that kind and gentle would make a good husband and a good father to any children that we might have, because I just watched how he interacted with people, how he interacted with his mother. And so she said eventually I wrote and accepted his proposal of marriage. And they were married sometime later at her father's house down in Tasmania, where Willie had first seen her. Ellen White had the prayer, I think she said. Anyway, a year later or so, along came twin grandsons. Ellen White, according to May, was ecstatic. They were born, I think she said, about 10 o'clock at night. She was ecstatic because she only had girls from the first marriage. And I realized that, politically correct now, we don't worry about things quite as much back then, but Ellen White back in the 1890s, she wanted boys because she wanted the White name carried on. And that was very important to her. Now she had these two little grandsons. And she was there in the room that night, and I don't know if Willie and May didn't know they were going to have twins, or so didn't have two names or what, I don't know. Anyway, May said that Ellen White asked if she could name her grandsons, and they said, sure, why not? So, what did she name those two little boys? Well, she worked in the names of all four of her boys, her husband's name, as well as May's brother's name. So, here's what she named them. One of the twins was James Henry White. James, of course, was Ellen White's husband, was James, and James was the first name of son number 2, James Edson White. Henry White is, of course, the first name of her oldest boy, Henry Nichols White, who died at 16. So there's two boys and the husband. Now, what did she name the other little twin grandson? Herbert Clarence White. Well, Herbert was the first name of May's brother. His name was Professor H. Camden Lacey, Herbert Camden Lacey. Herbert was also the name of the little baby that died at 12 weeks, John Herbert. And so Herbert, and then Clarence, that's the middle name of Willie, William Clarence White. So in those boys, she got all four of her boys, her husband's name, and May's brother's name. So if anybody ever thinks that Ellen White was just somebody who was anti-courtship and anti-romance, they just need to know, this is not the only story, but this is the most detailed story that we have about how Ellen White did her very best to make certain that Willie was able to marry this young girl. It's a side of Ellen White, as I say, we don't usually think about, Ellen White, the matchmaker.